On today's bonus episode of TWB, we're breaking down the Bills' dominant win over the Tennessee Titans and an injury update on Dane Jackson.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Andrew Chang and Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia, welcome into a bonus episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo FAMBase podcast network. My name's Justin. I'll be your host tonight. And for today's episode, because we drop our podcast on every Monday with some of these primetime games coming up, the schedule gets a little screwy. You know, you're getting our game preview the day of the game. But then if we wait until the next Monday, we're going to be missing a game reaction day. So keep an eye out in the future. Anytime we have one of these primetime games, there's probably going to be a second episode this week, or that week rather. Want to make sure that there's no games that we're missing a reaction on. So just a little bonus content out there for the loyal fans. And today, obviously, we're going to be talking about that beatdown that happened against the Tennessee Titans, 41-7. But right off the top, I want to just go right to the Dane Jackson injury first. Obviously, very scary to see on the field, and for me, I don't know how you all feel out there. It's kind of hard to enjoy the second half of that game as much while it's going on until kind of getting a resolution on Dane Jackson. So we did see Mike Garafolo on Good Morning Football today. He did report that Dane Jackson he's already home. He's out of the hospital. He walked out on his own power. So I guess we don't know a ton after that as to, what kind of any sort of long-term effects or what exactly the injury was. I'm sure we'll be getting some more information on that as we go forward. But great to see just the movement in all of his extremities. He's able to be out of the hospital the next day and be able to go forward. So getting into the game, the results of this game are kind of what I felt like last week's game against the Rams should have been. You take out some of the turnovers and whatnot, and just a much cleaner game. And yeah, the score ends up being 41-7, but at a certain point, we're playing our backups for most of the fourth quarter. Probably easily could have been a few more points put up, but kind of that feeling that we had against the Rams, where despite some of the sloppiness, the game never really felt like it was in question. I feel like we got more of the same tonight, and without having to overcome 4 turnovers. This is what it looks like. You had, a few less points from them, 10 more from us, and kind of throttled down in the fourth quarter to kind of coast it out. So we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things, 26 of 38, 317 yards, 4 touchdowns, quarterback rating of 128.9. What I really liked about this game, he was only sacked once, and he put up these numbers with having most of the fourth quarter off. And what I didn't like about the game is I have Josh Allen in fantasy. The guy I was playing against had Stephon Diggs, and he kept throwing all his touchdowns to Diggs. So it became pretty hard to keep pace when the numbers are going up together. Other than that, love the game, and I'll sit here every day, 7 days a week after a Bills win, and I'll take a loss in fantasy to get to watch the game that we had last night. So another great game from Josh Allen. Pretty much more of the same of what we've kind of gotten used to from him. I remember there was one pass, I think it was to Gilliam out in the flat, and he's kind of like looking off to the right and is swinging it to Gilliam on the left side. I could be wrong. I haven't watched the game the second time yet. But he's got somebody out in the flat, and he just kind of doesn't get his body all the way through and just does a little flick. And it would have been for a first down, and it was just kind of a low and away pass. And I texted my brothers, and I was like, this is something that we used to see from Josh Allen on a pretty regular basis. And for the most part, that's out of his game. So, having that be a rarity, it's really, really good to see how far along he's come. I thought the offensive line did overall a pretty good job protecting him tonight. That being said, I had mentioned that he only had one sack. Overall, I thought they did well in pass protection. With Mitch Morse going out, still held up pretty nice across the front. Josh did have some pressure, got knocked down a couple times. But again, only one sack on the night. I will say that Tennessee has, kind of a pretty good front four, front seven. They run the 3-4 defense. We talked about it kind of in the preview show of, in particular, a dude like Jeffrey Simmons up front, and he can just kind of wreak havoc. So I thought they did a good job keeping Josh clean in pass protection. Don't think we had the best game in run blocking. And I think there's a couple things that go into this. I do think Tennessee was really keying in on shutting down the run. I think we also jumped off to, a pretty good sized lead. So maybe they thought that we were going to run more to salt away some of the clock. But I mean, they got their result on, shutting down the run game, but did nothing to stop the passing game. So not a game where it really affected us, but when I look at the running back numbers here, all the running backs had one pretty good sized run. James Cook snapped off a 33-yard run. Great to see him get back into the game. Great to see, a big lead towards the end of the game and really be able to give him some work versus just getting, like 2 opportunities throughout the game. So he got some significant touches. But when we look at it overall, he had the 33-yard run. Singletary had a 16-yard run. Moss had a 17-yard run. And when we take out those long carries for each running back, we have James Cook carried it 10 times for 20 yards. Without the 16-yard run, Singletary had 5 carries for 3 yards. Without Moss's 17-yard run, he had 2 carries for 0 yards. So it's something I'm keeping an eye on. I guess if we look at the teams over the last couple of years, and we all know that this team's identity is passing, right? I mean, you can look at it just from the numbers alone. I mean, with a game that we won by 31 points, we're talking somewhere in the ballpark of 15, 20 carries from the running backs. So obviously it's not a giant focal point for this team. I guess I've been myself talking about it for a while of wanting to have more of the run pass balance, and it's not necessarily in the 50% of plays are rushing, 50% are passing. Kind of doing like a 60-40, 65-35. But with how effective our passing game is, just being able to kind of use the pass to set up the run, and maybe we only have 10 carries in a game from running backs, but they're averaging 4 yards a carry and they're in key spots. And this game was not it. And like I mentioned, I don't think there was really great running lanes. I thought Tennessee did a good job stuffing the run, and overall, it comes out in the wash. We still have a dominant win, but it's going to be something throughout the season that there may be a game where we need to lean on the running game a little bit. So a little bit concerning in that department tonight, but I would say that's really my biggest complaint from this game. Um, Wide receivers and tight ends, I was interested to see how this would shake out. Um, Gabe Davis obviously pops up on the injury report late in the week. He's inactive for the game. So was kind of curious to see how those touches were replaced, and it was an awful lot of Stephon Diggs. I'll tell you what, seeing the numbers that were put up in this game, I would have loved to have seen what it looked like with Gabe Davis. I think there's a chance that we could have had two receivers over 100 yards. But Diggs snaps off 12 catches, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just had a great game. This was a matchup that I talked about in the preview show of, they have some good, young, talented cornerbacks, but you're playing against one of the best route runners in the league. And for McCreary, it was his second start. For Farley, he's still young in his career in his second year. So Diggs just went out there and did what Diggs does. Kumaro contributed. He had something in the 50-yard range. Had that one really nice down the sideline bomb. And I remember watching that as he's running down the sideline. I'm like, man, I wish that wasn't Kumaro. I wish that was Davis. And, Kumaro's been overall a pretty reliable receiver when he's been called upon with this team. But just in my head, I was like, man, I wish that was Davis. But he hauled it in. It was a great catch. And, he made some other contributions. He had some first downs in there. And for a game where our depth was kind of being tested and we needed other players to make plays, we saw Crowder get in there. We saw McKenzie get in there. We saw Knox have a little bit more of a load from last week. He seemed to be more, the guy keeping us on schedule, getting those dirty yards over the middle. But Knox had a good game. I believe it was 5 catches, 41 yards. And then my dude, Reggie Gilliam, I have loved this dude going back to last year, and great to see him get a touchdown, and not only get a touchdown, but the way the play played out, he looked like it was kind of like a tight end fullback screen type deal, and he's breaking tackles and making dudes miss behind the line of scrimmage. And I mean, if you took the numbers and nameplates off the back of the jersey, I could have been convinced that was Singletary out there. So he had some pretty sweet moves to bust out for the first score of the game, 17-yard touchdown for Reggie Gilliam. So overall passing game, just like I said, great game overall for them. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back from the break, we are going to talk about special teams quickly and then some of the keys on defense. Stick around.
Hey, this is Brother Bill. Now back to the show.
Bill's Mafia, welcome back into this bonus episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast. If you've made it this far, do me a favor. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, click all the buttons. We have content coming out every Monday. There's going to be some bonus episodes sprinkled in. With the primetime games, not really sure when those will always drop, but you want to make sure you don't miss anything. And it does help us out immensely for what we're doing here. And thank you in advance for that. We're going to jump back into this episode. We're going to start with the special teams, and I guess not really a ton to talk about on special teams. Bass remains perfect. Looks to be no problems with the field goal kicking operation, the holding, the snapping, all that it's crazy became such a big concern with Matt Hawk being here and him being such a great holder. And it was like something that I've never really seen an issue with any of my teams that I've watched. But all of a sudden it was like, we got Matt Hawk because he's a great holder. And I was like, well, what's going to happen when he's gone? Nobody else knows how to hold the ball like him. And that went away pretty quickly. Punting, they kept flashing up the stat of, how long it's been since the Bills punted last, and it's been like 4 games, and they didn't punt in 4 of the last 6, whatever the stat was. Well, we bust out a couple punts today, get a couple muffs, get some turnovers there. So maybe this is like the gadget play for the Bills now. The teams get lulled to sleep. They don't have their reps in and covering punts. And jokes aside, the kick coverage, punt coverage was great, and we're able to capitalize on a couple muffs there. So for a team that doesn't have to punt very often, to have the special teams be sharp and give the ball back like that was great to see. On the defensive side of the ball, I thought the defensive line in the stat box didn't look overall as dominant as last week. But I think last week was kind of one of those outlier weeks. As good as this revamped defensive line looks, you're not going to have a team that averages 7 sacks a week in and week out through this NFL season. I thought this was more of what we can expect to see, like pretty consistently, and then have some highs from there. But I think this game was about the floor of what you're going to see from this defensive line. Obviously doing it without Ed Oliver in there. Kind of testing the depth a little bit, getting some of these other guys a little bit more run. Von Miller was overall, by like Von Miller standards, held in check a little bit. That still meant that he was making tackles in the backfield. He was stuffing the run. He was getting pressure on the quarterback, beating double teams, and he doesn't flash up in the sack column this week. It's easy to look at a box score and be like, Miller did nothing. But when you watch the game, Von Miller had an impact on that game. We saw Groot get a sack. I feel like Groot is coming into his own this year. He looks like he's playing confident and really starting to develop and blossom. And this is a guy that we have to remember, last year for his rookie season, I feel like he played pretty consistently. He was involved with stuffing the run. He was doing his assignments. And his last year of college, he missed due to COVID. So it was kind of losing that 1 year of development. And kind of one of these players that we've seen Brandon Beane take his swings on, with betting on the physical talent and the skills, or the tools there to work with versus, the actual production right now. And I don't know if that's just, the work that he's putting in, if it's just kind of following his development arc. Maybe Von Miller being in the building is kind of helping him round out his game. But I think we're starting to see a little bit more consistency from Rousseau, and he's in the backfield. He's stuffing the run. He's getting after the quarterback. He's making plays. So that was very exciting to see for me. I really love Groot, and if he turns into half the player that I think he's going to be, we're going to have a great defensive end for a long time. And the most important thing about this defensive line, and this is where I say kind of the floor of what the defensive line is, that even feels kind of wrong to say, because when you're looking at defensive line and it's a heavy passing league, like the sexy stats are, sacks, batting balls, forcing bad interceptions, all that. What I'm looking at for this game, and this is where I'm really happy with this defensive line, for a team that was susceptible to the run last year, and a guy coming into this game in Derrick Henry, who single-handedly made a lot of teams look really silly. A lot of individual players look really silly. This defense holds Derrick Henry to 13 carries for 25 yards. And that all starts up front for me. And not saying that this was all on the defensive line. We had some great open field tackles from some of the secondary, some of the linebackers. The one that keeps popping in my head in particular was Christian Benford, one-on-one with Derrick Henry behind the line of scrimmage and kind of in the open field on kind of like a outside stretch play. And just seeing Benford come up and make that tackle, like, this is a late round rookie coming in and making that play against arguably one of the best running backs in the league. Now, I will say, Derrick Henry's coming back from an injury. He did play in a playoff game last year, but had a pretty significant injury. So maybe he's still coming back from that. Maybe he's a little. He does look kind of a step slow to me. Maybe a little not quite confident with that power yet. But that's Derrick Henry right there, and his name alone strikes fear into some of these players. So seeing the defensive line, be able to handle that assignment, seeing the rest of the players get involved in stuffing the run game. I talked about it in the preview show. I wanted to say that the Bills keeping Henry under 80 yards meant to win. I was a coward and I said 100 yards, and the Bills must have listened to the Wandering Buffalo last week and really wanted to make me look stupid because they held him to 25 yards. I thought it was a great game from the linebackers. They looked really confident, comfortable, natural, playing loose, triggering downhill, getting involved with stuffing the run game, making plays in coverage. We saw Milano with a pass breakup or two. Obviously comes away with the pick six. Really exciting to see. And then Tremaine Edmonds with some splash plays. And these are what I'm hoping we start seeing from Edmonds consistently this year. The one blitz where he gets a sack, there was no hesitation on that. There wasn't any slowdown, anything. He goes straight through Tannehill and really thumped him up a little bit, and that's something that I haven't seen a ton from Edmonds. He's in there, he makes plays, he stuffs the holes at the line of scrimmage in the run game. But what I've really been waiting to see from him consistently is him using that size of his and getting downhill and really just thumping somebody, because he has all the skill set to do it. So seeing that, there's a couple good whacks he had on Derrick Henry as well. I thought it was a great game for the linebackers. And, obviously, overall a great defensive performance. Get some two turnovers, get a couple sacks on Tannehill. You've held the opposing team to 7 points all game. Obviously, I have a lot of glowing review from the whole defense, the whole team for that matter. But the secondary was also impressive again this game. Obviously, we had the scary injury to Dane Jackson, and at a position where we're already kind of thin, not that we don't have the depth there, but kind of the young guys that we haven't seen a ton from yet. I thought Elam came in and played great through the remainder of the game. He had the one play, he kind of snuffed out a screen and stopped it before it got started. He had a couple pass breakups. I thought he played great. Benford continues to be just this looking like a genius pick by the Bills. Late round pick, kind of an afterthought in the draft. And this dude is coming in and not only getting playing time, but starting on a Super Bowl caliber roster. And just thinking about that, we talked about this a ton through the offseason about, it being difficult to get undrafted free agents to want to come here because they're going to face this huge uphill battle to make the roster. We're bringing back so many players from last year, and for a rookie 6th-round pick to come in and just make the noise that he's been making throughout the summer and coming into these football games, just props to him for putting in the work to get himself out there. Props to the coaching staff for bringing him along where he needs to be. And what I was looking for in this CB2 spot was the Elam type player of getting, the more physical skill set, more of the speed attributes, more being able to line up in man coverage. But what I wanted to see most of all was maintaining the floor that we had with Levi Wallace. I personally was calling for Levi Wallace to come back, especially when I saw the contract that he got with Pittsburgh. With the uncertainty on Trey White and, not knowing when he may or may not be back this season, I wanted to have at least one cornerback spot where we maintain the floor of knowing what Levi Wallace was last year. And at the very least, Benford has come in and been that and more. So, again, the Bills front office is smarter than me, and they know what they're doing. Safeties. We saw Micah Hyde come out of the game with an injury. Haven't really seen much news on that yet, but hopefully we get some good news in that department. But they had another stellar game. This is kind of like the safety tandem is kind of like talking about Josh Allen on offense for me. It's like every week you're going to hear me say that they had a great game. That's just what they do. Poyer comes away another game with another interception, and the defense as a whole, talked about the run game, holding Derrick Henry to 25 yards. Talked in the preview show about how Tannehill might not be, a top 5, top 10 quarterback in this league, but he is a guy that can win games, in particular if they can get the running game going and kind of beat you with some of that play action, the setups there. So the defense holds Ryan Tannehill to 11 completions on 20 attempts for 117 yards and 2 picks. I would say that is a pretty great result. Just wrapping up the show, I kind of want to take a look back at some of the keys that I had for the Bills coming away from this game with a win. My first major key was limiting Derrick Henry. Check. Don't shoot yourself. We had some moments where we did shoot ourselves in this game, and it was kind of weird things that I haven't seen a ton of. Thought it was weird officiating thrown in there too. But we had the offsides penalty, where they kind of jumped the snap count but didn't go into the neutral zone, but got us to move, and it was penalty on us. Then there was the one we went up to the line to do a hard count and got them to jump, but Sean McDermott took a timeout right before that happened, so that kind of came off. But what I was mostly talking about in this don't shoot yourself category was protecting the ball, not making those huge game-changing mistakes, and we were able to do that this week. We were clean with the ball, no turnovers. Overall, good job in that department. And then the last key was testing the young secondary, and obviously we saw that Allen to Diggs connection. We saw the other receivers get involved. But it was a game that we weren't really able to do much on the ground, and the success that we had did come from testing that young secondary. So overall, kind of the ways in which I thought the Bills would win this game is how it came to happen. So glad to see that. So we're on to next week. We'll take our day to celebrate here, and next up we head on down to Miami for our first division game. This is going to be a tougher game than I think it's been in the past. We've seen Miami kind of come out of the gates looking strong. Obviously this weekend, a ridiculous game from Tua that I never thought I would see. 6 touchdowns, something like 400 yards, and kind of just the speed that they have all over this offense. So I think this is going to be, I don't want to say the first major test for the defense because, the Rams had a great offense last year. The Titans had a pretty damn good offense last year. For me, seeing how Miami's come out of the gates, I think this is a chance, first division game on the road. I think this is a real good chance to set the tone for the rest of the season. Really come in and leave your mark on that game in Miami. That's going to do it for today's episode. We will have that Miami preview game episode coming out, so stick around for that. Keep an eye out for it. If you had any thoughts on this game, anything you wanted to talk about, go ahead and drop a comment. If you wanted to get involved with the show, make a guest appearance, anything like that, you can hit me up on any social medias at jgods22. You can search up the podcast on any social media. Just look for The Wandering Buffalo. That's going to do it. Thank you again for joining me tonight, and go Bills.